And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of the Wheelie Podcast, everyone. My name is Micah Toll, and I'm joined, as usual, by Electrek's founder and publisher, Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we have a very e-bike heavy episode this week. Lots of e-bike stories, everything from Burning Man potentially banning electric bikes to a new Walmart e-bike that comes with backwards handlebars. New York City is cracking down on unsafe e-bikes at the border. We've got some other stories that involve Vanmoof, or rather anti-VanMoof style e-bikes that might be an answer to that Vanmoof bankruptcy. California is also considering creating a driver's license for e-bikes, and we're going to talk about a awesome little non-e-bike sailboat, but that you can tow with an e-bike. So where are we starting off, Seth?
Why Burning Man may start banning electric bikes.
Yeah, so Burning Man, if you're not familiar, it's kind of like a every year they create this huge festival. It's like a sort of bohemian paradise in the Nevada desert, and they create this massive sort of temporary city just out of where there used to be sand and dust. And bicycles are the main way to get around. But in the last few years, as e-bikes have become more popular, there's been a big problem with people riding too fast. So there's a 5 mile an hour hard speed limit at Burning Man. There are no vehicles outside of like staff vehicles, so everyone gets around by bikes, and you're not allowed to go faster than 5 miles an hour. But of course, when you have an e-bike, it's very easy to go 20 or 28 miles an hour. And unfortunately, lots of people have been doing that. And it's a real problem. There have been a lot of injuries, people getting hit by bikes that just aren't looking for it. As you can imagine, with this type of massive sort of artist festival gathering, there are a lot of mind altering substances being used on a regular basis. And so when you add in people at different states of euphoria and not paying attention and fast moving vehicles, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. So fortunately, there haven't been any like major injuries, but there have been a lot of collisions. And so Burning Man has issued sort of this ultimatum this year that they're not going to start banning e-bikes right away, but if behavior doesn't improve at the coming Burning Man, they may have to do that. Either they'll start requiring you to register your e-bike when you come into the encampment, or they'll just outlaw them altogether. And so it's a big deal because Burning Man has always been this sort of like radical inclusion, like not no rules, but very much like just be good to each other, and we have almost no rules. So it would be a big deal to see Burning Man not only create this big sort of prohibition of e-bikes, but also to take a form of transportation that's very popular there, two-wheeled transportation, and severely limit it. But as usual, it often comes down to this case of a few people ruining it for everyone. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I mean, so let's take the numbers here. 5 miles per hour, 0 hills. I kind of feel like you can probably do without the e-bikes and Burning Man. I mean, I do see some sand there. You probably want to have a little bit of a fat tire bike, but like this is one case where I kind of feel like you could probably, you know, forego the e-bike. If you want to go off into the desert, maybe like, outside of the city limits, city with quotation marks limits, you can certainly, it seems like a good use case for an e-bike because the playa is basically just like a big, dirt flat that goes for like hundreds of miles in every direction. So, that's a use case. I think e-bikes make sense if you want to just go out and, tear around outside of the city limits. But for 5 miles per hour, there's really no reason. Like that's barely like you can do that with your feet. You don't even need pedals really.
Yeah.
Uh, so like, and this is the rare case where I'm like, okay, that I guess makes sense. So sort of. I mean, if you have an e-bike and you don't have a regular bike, I guess you could bring that around and just leave the electric part off or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of a point that they were making when they wrote this, is that, like obviously the Burning Man people, they're very inclusive and they're not going to like, try to put anyone down. But what they were kind of implying was like, look, this is an area that's best enjoyed at a slow pace. And if you're going that fast, you're missing all of the beautiful things around you.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the altered state of consciousness, like who are like if you're enjoying that, you may not be looking both ways at an intersection or whatever. And it, like if you jump on a e-bike, you may not really realize how fast you're going or what's happening at all around you. So I get all the things. 5 miles per hour makes sense. I know it's a pretty big place, so it probably take quite a while to get from one side to the other. But I think this is one of those things where you probably should avoid that.
Yeah, common sense needs to prevail here.
Yep. All right. That's kind of the first time I've ever been. Yeah, e-bike's probably not the best tool for that job. Speaking of not the best tool for the job, we have Walmart with a super cheap 20 mile per hour electric moped, but the handlebars are on backwards.
Yeah, this is kind of beautiful in its like terribleness. So I found this thing while perusing Walmart's e-bikes, and they have a number of interesting, kind of nice e-bikes. But this one, for some reason, they've
You're
installed the handlebars
you're being
backwards.
you're being too kind, really. They have a
It-
they have a bunch of bikes, let's just say.
There you go. But this one is special in its own way. And it's not like someone just spun the bars around. Like then they continued and installed the brakes and everything on it in a backwards configuration. And it's not just one picture either. Now, I can't tell if this is a mistake or if the bike is intended to be this way because they do have a couple pictures where the bars are on correctly, like the one with the guy on it down below. And so I'm kind of thinking that they didn't intend for this to be backwards, that like before one of the bikes went to the photo shoot, someone just put it together wrong, and then it got all of its product photos with the handlebars on backwards. And it is important to say that it's not technically wrong. I thought it was at first. Like I've never heard of someone installing the stem backwards, so the bars are like, kind of back in your lap. But I looked it up, and there are a few cases where you would do this. Apparently, some people do this when they do a lot of stunts on the bike, or sometimes for people with very short arms, they'll have the bars installed this way with a backward stem because it brings the bars back closer to your body. But it does result in twitchier steering. So if you're the kind of person that's always ridden a quote unquote normal bike with normal handlebars and you got on this, all of a sudden the steering would feel very funny to you until you got used to it. So I'm thinking it's probably just a mistake and not that Walmart wanted to do a backwards handlebar bike. But otherwise, I mean, the bike looks kind of interesting. Mag wheels, moped style, 780 bucks. Now it is listed in one place as 250 watts, and another place is 750 watts. So
That sounds
in
right.
yeah, in usual Walmart fashion, they don't seem to understand their product very well. But it's also full suspension, probably cheap suspension. But otherwise, it could have been kind of an interesting low cost bike. But the fact that they don't even know how to like install it correctly for the photo shoot makes me a little bit worried about it.
Yeah, I noticed the cabling in the picture with the actual human on it looks correct. It's in the front, whereas the big picture, the cabling is actually behind the fork. Uh, yeah, we have issues. Houston, there's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've never seen something like this before. And normally they put so much time and effort into these photo shoots. Like I've seen they even like, adjust the position of the pedals and everything like that to like get the best angle. So I'm amazed this went forward.
It's funny because it's almost like an MC Escher, like how like you could almost turn the bike handlebars around. You'd have to remove the light though, obviously. And no, I guess you couldn't do that. Like it's on there.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like if it arrived this way, it would be a good amount of work to fix because you've got to take the brakes off, you got to take the shifter off.
Right.
Everything on the bars has to come off and switch sides also.
Yeah, I mean this is actually a lot of like somebody was putting this all together who clearly had like I mean probably had never put a bike together before. Uh yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing that they just made it to the website.
Yeah.
It's impressive in its own way.
Or maybe they intended for it to be this way. They were like, this is a short-armed person's electric moped.
Well, like it got publicity. Like we're talking about it. It got a webpage devoted to it. So maybe they're the geniuses.
Yeah, some marketing guy at Walmart is like, "See, I told you guys it would work."
This has been my plan the whole time. All right, moving on. Why New York City once electric bikes stopped at the customs border, the U.S. border, not the state border, because there is no border.
Well, I mean, it depends how you look at it because
Hmm.
so New York City recently um, passed a ban on non-UL conforming electric bikes. So that means both a UL listing for the entire bike and for the battery, which, among other things, tests to make sure that they are not a fire hazard. And so it hasn't come into practice yet. There was a 6 month sort of grace period from when it was passed a few months ago, but soon you will not be able to sell non-UL certified e-bikes in New York City. So like you can't even bring them in to shops at the fairly porous New York City border. And so this has been a really big issue. I mean, it applies everywhere, but in New York City, electric bike fires have been sort of even bigger stories because not only are there so many more e-bikes in the city, estimates put it at like 60 to 70,000 e-bikes, but because it's such a densely populated city, there are so many people living in high-rise apartment buildings where often low-cost, cheaply made e-bikes are being charged overnight. And in several unfortunate cases, this has led to fatalities when very cheap e-bike batteries have caught fire in these large buildings, and it sometimes traps people inside. And so that's what New York City is trying to prevent. It's already happened, I think, 13 fatalities this year, which is a significant rise. It used to be, three or four a year, and we're halfway through the year and already at 13. And that's just New York City. These numbers are underreported everywhere, but I think what we saw were something like 100 fires in New York City and 200 countrywide, which again is surely underreported, but it's been a huge deal in New York City, partly because there are so many e-bikes used for delivery and courier jobs, which is very much a New York City phenomenon, and that the best way to get around is on two wheels, and so if you want your food delivered quickly, it's going to be on an e-bike. And because of the way those jobs work, they're all independent contractors, where the people that work these jobs basically have to buy the cheapest e-bike they can in order to, make their low wages go further. And unfortunately, that means a lot of these cheaper, poorly made batteries. It also means that when these batteries break down over time, they're taken to sort of no-name repair shops or unlicensed repair shops to get that bike back on the road, so that someone who's making a very low wage doesn't have to go buy a new e-bike. So all of these factors compound into what can become a very dangerous situation. So New York City has implemented a few things. In addition to this ban, they've also received $25 million in funding to create electric bike charging stations around the city, which are designed basically for these workers so that they can charge their batteries somewhere and not bring them, into their apartment and charge it in their living room kind of thing. And so the city is just trying a lot of different things to help cut down on this very serious issue, something that didn't used to be as prevalent, but now as e-bikes become so popular, we're seeing it a lot more. I mean, Seth, you lived in New York City for a long time, right?
Yeah, and I still go down there quite a bit. We're in the suburbs north of the city now. It's funny because the bike we're looking at on the video is a typical example of the delivery bikes, and like I don't know the numbers, but I imagine that these things are probably one of the primary culprits, just because it's a very similar bike across all, and they go really fast. They're you know they're kind of cobbled together. The batteries are huge, and they're no name brand stuff. So like I would want to dig down at the numbers deeper. We should also mention we had Luke Workman
Workman.
on a few weeks ago, who's a battery expert, former CTO at Zero, and kind of investigates these bike fires. And his kind of big takeaway for me was that saline water vapor, not drops, but the kind of vapor that can get through tiny holes and such, was like a primary reason that these bike fires or lithium ion battery fires happen, and they're pretty hard to prevent. Um, if you're looking to kind of prevent a bike fire, um, you know, making your battery almost 100% like like it would almost have to be like putting a balloon around it or something, but then you have to like get the electricity out somehow. So it's kind of a like how do you prevent this thing even with good batteries? It's hard to imagine. Uh, there's no like 100% way to prevent that. What do you think about like I know you had like a battery box, like a big metal box that kind of could contain a battery fire. How do you feel about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's some companies that even sell those. Like Lunicycle, has it's kinda like an ammo tin that,
Hmm.
is exactly, what you described. It's a big metal box to put the battery in, where at least if it does catch on fire, it's contained in something metal that you could, chuck out a window or will at least prevent it from spreading quickly to the couch kinda thing.
Hmm.
I know some people actually charge their batteries in their oven or in their, barbecue on their back porch kinda thing for the same reason, it's a kind of a self-contained box that's designed to get hot, and I think that is a good method to use. Now, again, like I always feel it's important to point out that like when we talk about e-bike fires, this is like a one in several tens of thousands, several hundreds of thousands kind of situation.
Hmm.
Because even the 100 fires in New York City this year, I mean, you've got 65,000 bikes being charged every day. So this is one in hundreds of thousands of charges. So it's not something that the average person needs to worry every time they plug their battery in. But taking preventative measures, like you said, some type of safe charging box could be a good idea, especially if like, hey, I bought this bike for like $600, and this is probably not the highest quality
That's
battery.
the other thing. I kind of feel like so, just anecdotally, we have bikes in my garage 2 floors down right now. Um, I don't feel worried about it, but those are all like name brand bikes. I mean, they're like, that we have a couple Juice down there. This was pre their UL listing, but I kind of feel safe with those particular batteries. We have a trying to think of the other ones down there. We have a Luna. Actually, we have two Luna bikes down there. We know Luna spends a lot of time with their batteries. Luke actually even called them out specifically with their battery cases being pretty solid in the cells. So but we reviewed the 65 mile per hour scooter the other day, and I'm not saying that battery is bad or good or whatever, but that thing's out in the shed in the backyard, so that's not gonna catch our house on fire. So we do have a dividing line. We have some quite old like Saunders bikes also in the shed um, that we probably wouldn't would you know I don't think they're gonna catch on fire, but frankly, I have like this in my head like what is safe and what isn't safe. So, and our garage is probably pretty big. Like there could be a fire, and I don't think it would catch the next thing on fire. If we don't put our cars in there. So I don't know. I have in my brain like, all right, when I look at my bike, if this thing caught on fire, would it skip over to some other battery, or would it catch something else on fire? Would it catch like the roof on fire? And I kind of feel like we're safe, but who knows? And we have three electric vehicles as well. So, and one of them's a Chevy Bolt, but after the big fire issue was fixed, so I don't stay up at night worrying about that stuff.
Yeah, and there's I don't want to jump into the comments too quickly, but there is one that popped up that's something I did want to talk about. And Luke mentioned actually that one of the only methods he's seen that is he didn't say it's 100% foolproof, but what he said is that he's never had to do a forensic case on a battery like this. Is the style that they are actually potted in resin. So like the battery is built and then they pour liquid resin into the battery case, so the entire thing is just surrounded in it, and it's basically it isolates every cell from each other, and so even if a cell were to short circuit, overheat, it's separated by a layer of resin, and it can't spread to other cells. And there aren't very many companies that do this. Lunicycle does do it. I don't think it's all of their batteries. I think it's special batteries you can order from them. There was a Canadian company, Grin Technology, that made battery packs like this for a while. I don't think they make those anymore, but that seems to be the best method to prevent this thermal runaway, but it is very rarely done in the industry.
Now, obviously you buy a bike, you own the battery. Would you ever recommend or try like pouring your own resin over the battery case, or open up the battery, look at the, have it at the cell level? Would you ever recommend pouring your own resin in between the batteries?
So I think for legal reasons, we should start by saying we don't recommend doing anything to your battery, and you should
Ever,
never remove a screw from your case.
right?
As a DIY hobbyist, if you have the correct resin, it is something that would actually be fairly easy to do yourself. I think that the pack design requires that there's at least a bit of space between cells to do it, or at least to make it effective. And a lot of batteries have the cells so close together, less than a millimeter or even touching, that it can be difficult. But I think, just theoretically, it shouldn't be that difficult to do something like this yourself.
Hmm. And then we know that Luna and Grin are two of the makers that do these. I wonder if there's like, you know, this kind of goes back to modularity, like that we really one of those things that we really wanted to get on a while ago is like, hey, make your batteries so that you can swap, get a new battery or swap out a battery, and that we were kind of hoping the industry would go to that, and it hasn't really happened, which is a shame.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's an interesting point though, that if you do this resin potting, it would basically prevent you from ever swapping out a battery cell or even recycling the cells, I think,
right.
because I don't know how you'd get them back out.
Well, I think the the battery recycling for cars, like the redwood materials, they just grind up everything and just turn everything to dust, and then they centrifuge the dust out. So
Oh, they go
theoretically,
back to the elements. Okay.
yeah, basically. So I guess that in that case, it would be okay. I don't know, because they're taking apart, like Tesla battery packs and stuff
Right.
like that. So they've got to be
Yeah. I
pretty
hope they have
hardcore.
good respirators in those buildings.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's all locked off to humans where that stuff is happening. All right, let's move on from that here. Um, After shocking bankruptcy, anti-VanMoof e-bikes like these may be the answer.
Yeah, so this was an interesting article that was written by Tuli Veshchegiv. I apologize, Tuli. I have no idea how to pronounce your last
What would
name.
you guys
But
say is
she's the CMO at Ampler. And I was actually hosting a panel about a month and a half ago that had executives from some of the biggest European e-bike companies. And it had Taco Carli from Vanmove there at the end. And right next to him is Tuli. And I asked Taco a question about e-bike iterations and whether he thinks
there's
that
a lot of new
the
e-bike brands
industry should
popping
be
up
at
every
this
corner right
situation
now because
where
it's
we're
becoming a thing.
creating new e-bikes
All kind of
every
seeing the
year, sort of
value
like an
in commuting
iPhone
on an
model,
e-bike.
or
But
whether
I feel
we should
like it's
sort of
also
find something
becoming a
that
quality
works and
issue.
stick with that for as long as
And I
possible.
think one of the biggest challenges.
And what he said was basically he thinks that the industry is accelerating so quickly that every year we need to come out with a new model. We need to, find the newest technology. And Tuli jumped in right after him and was like, "Wait, before you go on, Micah, I got to say something here." She was like, "I think this is the wrong idea entirely. I don't think we need to be making, new models every year like an iPhone. I don't even think iPhone needs to be making a new iPhone every year. It's wasteful. What we need bikes that are simple, that any bike shop can work on, that has technology that helps the bike but does not make it so proprietary that you can't work on it yourself." And a few weeks later, the guy sitting right next to her, his company went bankrupt, and here she is telling the world how I didn't want to say I told you so, but I literally told you so on stage a few weeks ago. And so it was kind of a fascinating little foreshadowing. And if anyone wants to go back and see that panel, I played a very small role. I only had to ask the questions. It was the smart people answering the questions here. But
Did you
it's
come
a
up with the questions, or do they kind of? Because I've been a panel moderator, and they're like, ask these questions.
I
Like,
got to come up with them,
oh, good.
which is funny because yeah, I gave them all the questions ahead of time, and Tuli was ready to jump in and take her own questions. So good for her.
That expression right there, I kind of feel like he's like, like the finances aren't that great right now. I wonder if I should be here. I don't know. kind of an interesting situation. Uh,
Yeah, so that
because
one was, I mean,
when was
it
this?
this was, mid-June.
Okay. And we should probably like back out a little bit. Vanmove obviously is a Dutch company that produced very bespoke bikes. They've been, lauded and criticized for, building their own like transmission and software for kind of, for me, it was like when I reviewed the bike, I was like, hey, there's all this cool stuff that I've never seen before, but the transmission, instead of having a manual gear shift, got harder to pedal as I was going up a hill, and I was like, you know, and they were like, "Don't worry, there's a software update coming that'll fix that." And I was like, I just want like some gears that I can put on my bike. And but a lot of their stuff was cool. Problem is now that they don't seem to be existing anymore. What do you do about the software updates? What do you do about unlocking it? Because everything had to go through their kind of servers. Um, so now I think there's a bunch of third parties that are kind of jumping in. One of their competitors, Cow or Mustache, no Cowboy,
Cowboy.
created a tool. And I know Upway was also talking about kind of swapping out their stuff. Upway is a company that refurbishes used and kind of overstock bikes. So they're, I think for like $100, they'll like swap out some VanMoof stuff and fix your VanMoof bike so it won't have to go through the servers. So it presents kind of an issue. Like, I mean, it's not just bikes, like phones, uh, cars, like all these things that need to call home and need to get updates remotely are kind of at the beck and call of like the company actually paying their bills. I experienced this previously with a boosted board. Like, Mike, I don't remember if you still have one as well, but like, Boosted went out of business and their app was just disappeared from the app store. So like, if you want to change this settings on your skateboard, you can't really do much there.
Wow. Yeah, no, I never actually had one for more than like a week or so. So that's interesting to have like such a like a high-end board that is now just stuck in whatever it was set at.
Yeah, and you can still get the app on Android via APK, and I believe the company that bought it like reinstated it or something. I haven't looked in a while, but it's just like one of those things. Like, if you buy a device that is connected to, it needs to connect to a home server or an app or whatever, you're now, you have to think about that. Is this company going to be solid? You kind of have to think about that. That has to be part of the equation when you're thinking about, all right, well, should I buy this bike? What are the financials of the company? Is it going to be around in 3 or 5 years?
Right.
So, by the way, that was a cool panel. We should have like put that on Electrek. It seems like a pretty cool situation. That was micromobility,
Yeah, that was Micromobility Europe. Yeah.
and that was like what, 2 months ago?
Like a month and a half ago.
Okay,
Yeah, it was a pretty big hitter. Like that guy next to me is the CEO of Cowboy there. So it was like a lot
okay,
of big hitters in the e-bike in the European e-bike market.
dude, make a post.
Yeah. All right, we'll be back with that.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on. California wants to create a driver's license for electric bikes. I have lots of opinions.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have lots of opinions. So the before you get like the pitchforks sharpened here, the idea behind this isn't that every e-bike rider will need a driver's license, but rather that unlicensed e-bike riders, so someone who doesn't have a driver's license for a car, they've never learned to drive a car, would require under this new bill to get a e-bike driver's license. And it should be pointed out this is still a bill that's in committee. It's not law yet. But the idea is that you have a lot of teenagers getting e-bikes that have never learned to drive. You have a lot of young adults even that just now I think driver's licenses are at an all-time low in terms of a lot of young adults just simply are not getting a license and not learning to drive because they can take a bus, they can take Uber, they can ride a bike. And so you have a lot of people getting these 20, 28 mile per hour e-bikes. They're sharing the road with cars, but they've never been taught traffic laws. Some of the stuff is fairly basic. You stop at a red light, you stop at a stop sign. But more complicated things, right of way, following distance, how roundabouts work, yielding, all this kind of stuff. Like you kind of got to be taught. It's not, common sense for someone who's never learned the rules of the road. And so the idea behind this is that if you don't have a driver's license, you would have to take a short e-bike driver's license uh, exam, I guess. So it'll be a written exam, and before that, I think there's several classes that sort of teach you the basic rules of the road and what could be important for someone on a bike or an e-bike. And the I can see how this would be very controversial. A lot of people think of e-bikes as this sort of like freedom vehicle, that they're not highly regulated. You're not going every year to pay your license and tag and registration, that kind of thing. But at the same time, because they've gotten so popular and we have a lot of teenagers and people that don't know how to drive on them, I see the value here. In fact, in Israel, where I live, we already have something like this. It was instituted several years ago for the exact same reason, that e-bikes became super popular with teenagers. And so it limited the age to a fairly high age, in my opinion, at 16 years old. So you're not allowed to ride an e-bike on the street under 16. It also created this e-bike sort of driver's ed and license situation for kids that don't have their license yet. Because in Israel, a lot of people don't get their license until they're 17 or 18. It's a little bit later than the US.
Hmm.
So to me, this makes sense. I know a lot of people are going to be, not as into the idea of needing to get a driver's license for an e-bike if they don't have a license. But I am curious what you think about it, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned both sides there. Like I kind of think of e-bike or bikes in general. And is it only for electric bikes? Would it be for regular bikes as well?
I think it's for electric bikes,
Okay.
yeah, which partly seems problematic that it's like, discriminatory, but they do go faster. So
Right, they do go faster, and they're more common on roads, I guess, like with
yeah,
traffic. Yeah, I mean, I see both sides of this. Like, bikes are meant to be, freedom things. I guess, like if they're going to be on roads, sharing roads with traffic, you should get a get some sort of um, safety test. Did it say anything about age? Like, what's the youngest somebody could have an e-bike?
yeah, I think it limited it to 12, I think, which is fairly low. I mean,
Yeah,
that's it doesn't bother me too much.
yeah. I don't think necessarily below 12 you should be on an e-bike. You could be if your parents are up for it.
And you
Uh,
happen to show skills in two-wheeled handling.
right. Um, yeah, it just, it's like one of those things where it's, like you kind of think of, hey, this is the freedom. I don't want to have to think about any of the government stuff, any licensing. Like I just want to hop on and go. But at the same time, like we're in a society, we're trying to be in a society here. Like, and of course, as we said before, some people always ruin it for everybody else. Uh, So I don't know. I see both sides of this. I hope they're able to kind of thread the needle and make it so easy that it's not a that it doesn't prevent people from e-bike riding. That's kind of it, right?
Right.
You don't want to slow down the adoption of e-bikes or people taking e-bikes, um, versus cars. Like, well, there's this 14-year-old kid who wanted to ride his bike to class or whatever, and because the license issue came up, his mom has to take him in a car or something.
Yeah.
That's the case you want to kind of avoid.
Maybe it can be like kind of a webinar followed by an online test kind of thing. So it's very accessible.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be pretty accessible, and hopefully the fees are almost non-existent or minimal. Um, yeah, I mean, we will definitely keep an eye on this, and maybe we'll take the test and see if we can pass it once it's available. I do feel wow, we got 273 comments. That's pretty big on a
Oh
e-bike.
yeah, there were a lot of opinions. It's funny because one of my favorites was someone who sort of like quoted my thing saying that we can't expect someone who's never driven or learned the rules of the road to understand some of these nuances. And someone was like, well, parents can teach their kids about following road signs and stuff. It's like, man, how many adults don't know the rules of the road?
Yeah, I know.
It's not
All right,
something I want
so
to entrust.
let's maybe dive in here. In the Netherlands, we had cycling tests in the 6th grade. We did not need a license because all the kids in the country learn the road rules and do the cycling test. There are many things taught in school today in the US that I would consider lower priority that could be replaced with a cycling test. I I agree. Like
Yeah,
that
they actually get like a little diploma in school for like cycling.
we should get that. We should like that should be part of the federal thing. I mean, where would cycling not be part of like childhood? So yeah, for sure. Safe protected bike lanes and trails need to be more common in every city. Okay, we're fully on board with that. Separate bicycles, e-scooters, walkers, and runners from traffic and vehicles. Children should be able to ride a bicycle to school safely and not need a license to do it. That's the problem. Like we just don't have that infrastructure.
Yeah.
Uh, doesn't exist. So what would my options be if I wanted to ride an e-bike in California as a tourist from abroad? So that's a good question. If I understand correctly, a valid U.S. car driver's license would automatically function as an e-bike license as well. Would that apply to my European car driver's license as well? I wonder if those little sixth grade Dutch diplomas would work for.
I think I have a photocopy here, officer.
Yeah, why not? You got your little diploma. Let's hypothetically assume I didn't have a driver's license, not uncommon where I live, regardless of income, due to good public transport and bike infra. Would I then need a U.S. resident status to apply for that e-bike license? Yeah, I mean, we're getting into all kinds of questions, and obviously, California is a huge tourist spot. When tourists come in with their bikes and they love bikes and they want to ride around California, which is an amazing thing to do. Whether it's over the Golden Gate Bridge to Sausalito, tons of great bike rides. California, I can imagine. All right. While I'm not inherently against this, it's lower on my list of priorities than making drivers retest every X years, having transplants take the test, having drivers vehicles. So yeah, there's a lot of good opinions here. I do think it would be good to have schools teach bike riding as part of PE. As part of PE, that's great.
I like that. Yeah.
All right, maybe we need to get on this. We need to have like a government wing of Electrek where we kind of we do our Electrek pack and we get on that. All right, one last story today. Check out this awesome little sailboat you can tow with a bicycle.
Yeah, this is a fun one. It's called the Easy Boat, spelled IZI boat, and it's basically kind of like a Hobie Cat if you're familiar with like those little Hobie sailboats. It seats up to four people. It's got this like center joystick, so you don't really need to, do like the normal like breeze the sheet, and I don't really know that much about sailing, but the normal like rope pulling and stuff.
Hmm.
They make it very easy to control. But the coolest part about this to me is that you can tow it with an e-bike, and because it just like it collapses down to something that's like 2.5 feet wide. It's got built-in wheels either for pulling it along the sand to launch it right on the beach, or towing with an e-bike. And it's even an electric sailboat in the sense that there's an option for it to have a small electric motor, which is very useful when you're like in a marina and you're trying to like navigate around lots of moored boats, or if you're out and the winds die down and you don't want to pull out your emergency paddle to go a mile back to shore kind of thing. But
Yeah,
something that's this accessible. I mean, this is something you could literally keep in your garage, not own a car, and if you live a mile or two from the beach, you just tow it with your e-bike. You could probably do it with a regular bike, but it's like 160 pounds or something, and so if you've got a hill on the way to the beach, that might be a tricky situation. But they market it as like saying e-bike towable, and that looks totally doable to me.
yeah. Is that actually a bike in the back of that thing, or is that something else?
I'm not sure. I don't see a bike that's like that Bigfoot grainy picture where everyone's trying to
Yeah.
make it out.
Let me see if I can zoom
Enhance,
in.
enhance.
Enhance. Looks weird. It's not a bike probably, but yeah. So my in-laws have one of these in Florida. Not this exact boat, but like something this size. And we were actually uh, trying to like get it hooked up to the Rad Runner that they have down there. Because that would be kind of an easy thing to do. So great idea. Like I think this is definitely because it's a lot easier to just take these out to the beach like on a fat tire bike than it is to like get a car out there, or obviously like by hand, like pulling these through the sand is quite rough. So
Yeah, and
um,
parking also, like you save so much looking for parking. You can literally park right on the sand, you know?
yeah, I mean it's kind of just like a totally it makes sense. It's total like use case is right there. Um, I'm also interested in this electric motor. Did you have any information on that?
Yeah, so the information there was really scant. It was hard to even find a picture of it. I think it's like a fairly basic trolling motor, like you'd have on like, a very small
Like a
John boat.
Minn Kota kind of thing?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, you're not pushing around a lot of weight, and you kind of want to just
Yeah, and
get
those are they're really only used like, in a marina or as like an emergency return kind of thing. Like a sailboat, it's especially bigger ones, it's good to have some sort of motor for backup, but obviously it's not the primary form of propulsion when you've got a massive sail.
okay. So let's move into the comments here. I just saw one that I'm a little bit worried about here. Mike Marcello says, "I always ride my e-bike on my way to my friend Carl's house so we can play leapfrog wearing nothing but swim goggles and tube socks." That's
That's yeah.
that's pretty interesting. All right, EB 1888. We mentioned this earlier, but Luke mentioned the encapsulation to avoid vapor intrusion. Is there like they don't make like e-bike battery socks or like covers or anything that would prevent intrusion of saltwater vapor? Is there something like that?
I've never heard of anything like that. And if anything, like I think this might have been one thing that Luke mentioned was that when you try to make something 100% waterproof, if there's even like a tiny hole, or even like the air in the wire, you get something in and it's like the vapor can't get out again because you've made it so waterproof.
Right.
So I worry about, even trying something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the process for like making something airtight would be um you would like probably want to have like a super dry environment, like hair dryer, like the kind of the the, the battery to begin with, and then like I mean, I don't know, just I'm trying to like spitball here, just like get some sort of pack, like airproof bag, like like we said before, like a balloon, like maybe even a what mylar balloon kind of
Yeah.
in things. And I don't know if how you get the electric current in and out of that thing.
Maybe there's like a little tray with like a disposable desiccant packet that every like week you swap out your desiccant.
There's a good idea. All those like you get the nori sushi with the packet. Every time you get the packet, you just throw that into your battery pack. Yeah, it's a tough thing. I don't know what we can do. I don't know if I can click these links. Dan Fish has some links that looks like they're to evfiresafe.com. So I don't know.
Probably the like the Luna style charging boxes.
Yeah. And then one last thing is from EB88 again. License means violations and ticketing. So yeah, that's a good point. Like, if you don't have your driver's license and you're on your e-bike and the cop pulls you over, you just be like, like I'm just some guy. Like,
I'm just some guy.
because you like to get a ticket. I think you need a license number to assign the ticket to.
Right.
So if you don't have a driver's license, they can't really give you a ticket.
That's the crazy thing about the US. You can decide whether or not to tell a police officer your identity. Like you don't have that right in Israel.
Oh,
Like if
really?
you get pulled over, like you have to be able to show identification. Like it's a security thing. You can't like a cop can't be like, "Who are you?" and you're like, "I'm not telling."
Yeah. I'm a what are those people that don't have a state? You're just
Oh,
like,
not independent, sovereign citizens.
yeah, I'm a sovereign citizen. You don't have a jurisdiction over me.
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't exist in many places in the world.
Right. Exactly. So if you do like this will be another case of the man getting you.
Yeah.
All
Well, I
right.
mean, if you're violating, like, there are reason citations exist. Like,
Right. Right.
yeah.
All right. That's it for the comments.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. We will see you guys back in another 2 weeks for another episode of the Wheelie Podcast.